So the last video pretty much finished off the surrealist stuff. Um, just by the way, if you ever see the Mona Lisa with the twisty mustache, that was also done by Duchamp. And that, as you might imagine, someone messing with the Mona Lisa really upset people. Um, just like the fountain and these other works. Okay, let's see if I can try the pointer. Okay, so yeah, so the Bauhaus architecture was a thing, but I know there's like a paragraph or two on it, but they don't really show you what it looks like. This was a architectural style that became popular in Germany. I think it came to America by this guy named Walter Gropius. But do you see the building on the outside? The stark lines, the rectangular shapes, the geometrics really. See how you got the geometrics on the floor? This picture here is really staged. I think what's going on here is the artist is playing with your perspective, having things bigger in the front and smaller in the back, and then you can't tell that until you see the person to give you perspective. But notice the lines on the furniture that's Bauhaus. It's really not so much about comfort, but about really linear rectangles and triangles and really geometric shapes, even in the flowers and the patterns of the chairs or the wallpaper. But then you got these pops of yellow to give contrast, or pops of green or red or whatever. But mostly it's black and white and gray, though I guess you do have some blue here too. But most of the color is to highlight the black and white nature of things, and apparently the nature of life, and how things are linear and connected, and all things geometric. So that's what kind of Bauhaus looks like. And it really started in Germany, but it did make its way to America too. This song, "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime," should let's see if we can get it to play. So go ahead and play it this time, and then kind of take note of when you're playing it. What's the tone? It's pretty depressing, and they're saying about how I contributed to this and that from America, and now look where I'm at. So it's pretty much a bummer. Give that a listen to and go on to the next one. I think the Red Scare was mentioned. I don't know if the scope of how scared people was can really be grasped by the words there, but the fear of communism spread in America in the 20s and 30s as communists came to power in Russia, which became the Soviet Union, was real. And in America, it meant to some injustice, which I should learn about more next year with Sacco and Vanzetti and Leopold and Loeb, just to name a few. Communists, anarchists are really attacked, even though they didn't really do anything in America. And though some people did do things in America that was terrible. Um, Here you see a picture of a bomb. Someone bombed the stock market, the stock exchange in New York City. See the car tipped over, and these people covered up on the ground because they were killed by that bomb, and it was pretty awful. It's one of the first notable domestic terrorist incidents, but sadly, it wasn't the last, as we saw on January 6th of 2021. But basically, they're saying we'll, we'll eventually labor and strikes and disorder and riots will lead us to communism and chaos. And so we shouldn't go down that path. That's the message here. So what we should do is just stop labor, which is pretty messed up because labor doesn't really have that much power in America. It's really the business. It has a lot of concentrated power in a few people and some wealthy people. The Maginot Line. I know the Maginot Line was mentioned, but it flummoxed me. It was a pretty impressive structure when you looked at it. It was these concrete pillboxes. You see them? And they would have artillery in them, and it would, like, especially at the top, and there was these huge structure, and then you'd have anti-aircraft guns, and it was just really this impressively strong, well-built structure to help stop any attacking place. And the French would build it right near their border. That's what each one of these red dots represents. Here's the thing. See, the red dots are just along the German and French border. But in World War One, the Germans didn't attack along the French and German border. They attacked through Belgium. So guess what they're going to do in World War II? They're going to try to attack these monstrosities? No, they just do the same thing again. They attack right through Belgium, which was predictable. But somehow the French didn't build their Maginot Line all the way across. I don't know if they were working on it and didn't finish, but I know this. Where they really needed the Maginot Line is where the Germans attacked last time. If it was me, I would have built mine here first and then got to these, even if I had to space them out more. And at least I'd have a spot to center my defense and create a really defensive border as opposed to something that was just forested. But they were very intricate. There were spots to sleep, there were spots for food, spots for supplies, spots for dining, spots to have fun. And it was really a self-contained little city in the ground. And they spent lots and lots of money over it. And it was a fail. All right, you see them? Okay, let's go to the next. There was talk of the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Kellogg-Briand Pact is an attempt to create world peace. But what does the world peace happen? It blows up in everyone's face in 1939, because instead of peace, we get World War. And you can see the steps along the way, including 36, 37, 38. 37, what happened? The rape in Nanking. 38, you have Kristallnacht. And then 39, you get the invasion of Poland and the war starts. In this cartoon, international law and your moral authority is being destroyed, probably by a Japanese guy on the ground. Not fully sure, but I think that's a Japanese person. I don't think it's a little Hitler. It's one of the two, though, I'm sure. And I know it's supposed to be offensive, and I know they're trying to show Lady Justice as being bigger than those little other things, but they're not. It's also an attack on the Kellogg Pact because you can have international law and moral authority, but if you don't do anything about it, the people that are attacking be sneaky and they'll attack. So probably it was Japan as a reference to Pearl Harbor. Okay, I mentioned before that Manchuria was renamed Manchukuo by the Japanese, but it wasn't just Manchuria and China that got attacked. Japan really took over a bunch of areas. Everything with a date is a place where Japan took over. And really, they controlled the Pacific Rim by 1939, Had they just kept their little areas and not started messing with American ones, then who knows? They might have kept them forever. But once they attacked at Pearl Harbor, it was kind of over for them. See, this is 1905. I think the Japanese call this the Kuril Islands, and the Russians at the time would call it, I think, the Sakhalin Islands. I'm not 100% sure. It's been a while since I read about that, but this is the territory that was disputed between Russia and um, Japan, and it really led to the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. But the Japanese Navy defeated the giant Russian. Okay, let's go to the next one. League of Nations. Why did the League of Nations fail in Manchuria? Well, remember how America didn't sign the peace treaty? And so what you have here is gas thrown on world unrest. You have labor strikes, you have Bolshevism, communism coming to power, you got riots, You had German Reds, which are communists, and you have all these things adding fuel to the fire that is world unrest. And there's an attempt to try to create peace by putting out the fire. But really, the League of Nations, all they would be able to do is, you know, issue words of commendation, but they didn't have a military, so they could only do so much. So it kind of failed. All right, the last thing I would share is this Dawes plan. Um, Under the Dawes plan, there was this exchange of money sent to Germany. The U.S. gave loans to Germany. Why? Germany was broke following World War One, so they gave them money, $2.5 billion in loans. The Germans used that money to pay back the Allies $2 billion in reparations, and they used the difference to rebuild themselves. And the Allies used that $2 billion to pay the $2.6 billion they owed to the U.S. back. So the U.S. was getting its money back by giving loans to Germany, and then they created this war debt from Germany. And then there was a Young plan, something to do with that. But what happened was the Great Depression. The Great Depression set in, and the U.S. stopped sending money to Germany, and the Germans stopped sending money to the Allies, and the Allies stopped spending money to the U.S. And because people stopped spending, there wasn't enough money for businesses to keep growing. Once that happened, boom, the Depression went from bad to worse by 1930, and it looked like there was going to be no way out of this thing. Ironically enough, the only thing that did get the country out of war was, or this debt from the wars, was more war. World War II led America, Germans, and the Allies to start spending again in great numbers, which put people back to work, which put more money into the economy, which led to the gears and investment growing and enterprise growing once again. This is a picture of the Great Depression. This was done by the great Dorothea Lange. She was part of a project during the Depression to document the hardships people were suffering. Here, it's very remarkable that this woman who looks probably 47, but in real life, she's probably 37. And you know what kids usually do in photos? They smile, they cheese it up, but not these two little girls. No, not them. Look what they're doing. They got their backs turned. They won't even look at the camera, probably because they're really hungry. And I'm not talking missed lunch kind of hungry. I'm talking they've missed multiple meals and are really experiencing hunger. You've ever experienced this, you can identify with this, and you should be able to tell. Well, one of the other things that exacerbated the Great Depression were these big, giant, huge dust storms. And to mention a dust storm is not to see a dust storm. These dust storms were crazy. They would create these huge clouds, and it would just cover the whole area, and it would be destroyed by this dust. And it was just, oh my gosh, it was so much. It was just too much. Okay. And like everything around you would be covered in dust. And it would actually harm animals and people. It could kill you if it came at you hard enough, and eventually take cover. You could drown in it. There's just like huge layers. Why did this happen? Well, farmers started making a huge profit in World War One in America because only America was farming. Basically, Europe stopped farming, and so America started. Farmers became quite well off with their goods during the war, and because they were doing so well, they put their money back into their business. They expanded the amount they're farming, and they produced more farm stuff. But eventually, Europe started producing for itself again. So the supply increased, which really hurt the price of things. So the additional investment in lands and machinery by the farmers um, didn't work out so well. And so what they did to try to make up the difference on the prices declining for farm crops was they farmed more. And then there was a lack of water for a sustained period of time, and it caused all the topsoil to get loose. This topsoil, it went everywhere. It made a big mess, particularly through the Great Plains, but not just the Great Plains. And I'm not, you're talking the panhandle of Oklahoma, northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Iowa, uh, Missouri. I don't know what else. That's kind of pretty much it. But from that central area, it went everywhere. They found the same dust, and they could tell it was Great Plains dust. They found that same dust in California, in New York, in Florida. It was crazy. You'd have these huge, giant dust storms. Um, that's probably enough. Let's see if that's